Hello again, lovers of London, and welcome to another recording of Timetable, the podcast created by lovers of London just for each and every one of you. Every episode is set in a different historic pub, and today's guest joins us in the Cockpit in Blackfriars, famous on at least three significant counts, or I should say three significant counts and counting. First of all, famous for what went on here in this place in its cockfighting days. Famous for the Blackfriars Gatehouse that had previously and for centuries past been part of the Catholic priory that sprawled west from here where we're sitting. And possibly most famously of all, this was the site, or pretty much the site, of the one property that William Shakespeare purchased in London across the 3 decades he lived here. I'm joined as ever on Timetable by co-host and my good friend Geoff Browell, project lead for Heritage Collections at King's College London. Now, Geoff, you are in my front rank of people who love a good pub and a good story in almost equal measures, so I'd imagine you were wonderfully chuffed by our guest for this recording. In fact, to spare me the embarrassment of blonzering on about the history of this pub when both of you leave my poor history in the shade, perhaps you would like to pick up on introductions from this point.
Thank you, Tam. Thank
You're
you for
welcome,
that wise introduction, as always. So we're joined today by Clare Button. Clare's
Hello.
a good friend. We've known each other for many years. We've endured each other. We've enjoyed each other's company. And you are an expert on many, many subjects. You're a fellow archivist. You know a lot about London. And Clare, over to you. So where are we today? What's significant about the Cockpit?
Well, as Tom said, we're in the very lovely Cockpit pub in the City of London. And this is one of my favourite pubs in the country, but certainly my favourite pub in the city itself. And as we'll get on to, as well as being an archivist, I'm also a pub tour guide for Liquid History Tours, which is a company that delivers pub tours around London and talks about the history, much as we're doing today. And I always start my tours in the Cockpit, so it has a special place in my heart. But also, I knew it, just as a drinker, just as before I started doing the tours. I used to work nearby at Bart's Hospital, and on the odd lunchtime, I have to say at this point, by the way, I was not a surgeon. I was not in a clinical capacity.
I've tried it out.
I was in an archival
surgeon.
capacity.
Brain surgery.
I was not operating on anyone, but I used to sneak away on the odd lunch break to the Cockpit and enjoy a sneaky lunchtime pint, which is a dying art really nowadays, isn't it, in London? And one of the things I love about the pub is, obviously those listeners might need a bit of description to imagine it, but you've got this, it's a very enclosed space. It's a wonderful corner pub. It has quite an unusual triangular interior. And you've got these kind of frosted windows, if that's the right word. I'm sure there's a more correct term. It's very difficult to see out of, and more importantly, very difficult to see into. So nobody knows if you're in here. You can hide away from the busy London streets. So there's many, many reasons why this is a special pub. But I'd say it's pretty unique in the City of London as a whole because it's probably, I would say, the only proper boozer. And I'm a big fan of proper boozers. And they are hard to come by in the city because obviously you've got a lot of transient trade. You don't really have a lot of pubs that feel like they're somebody's local. And this is absolutely the exception to that. You've got it looks like a boozer. You've got the old carpets. You've got many times when you come in here, you'll see the same locals sitting at the bar, talking to the staff. The staff know everybody. And a lot of the people that I've got into conversations with in my time here, they come here often every day, certainly every week, and they commute in to call this their local. They don't live around the corner, but it's still a local pub for people who live outside of the city. So that's a very long answer to the question of why we're here, but it's a very kind of special pub for many reasons.
I can see it would be just on the timetable front. This is still early days. We've been around to quite a few pubs, and they share characteristics with each other to some extent, don't they? But I don't remember that we've been into any pub that's quite like this. This really is, as you say, pretty unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We used to have a lot in Shoreditch and places like that. I remember years ago having long liquid lunches that would last 2, 3, perhaps sometimes 4 hours, which was, and of course they would be really rough and ready, and some of them were strip pubs, which was quite something.
Have you been told that? I assume, Geoff, you've never.
I was going to say I defer to Jeff's experience and all these things.
I've been told that.
Someone's told you.
And of course because I was too busy cataloguing.
Of course, yeah.
And
Cataloguing what?
Yeah, exactly. Cataloguing just take an awfully long time, doesn't it?
It does.
Meticulous detail and everything else.
You've got no time for any drinking.
No
in the
time
archive
for dry
profession.
roasted nuts, a pint, and a stripper.
Strippers and dry roasted nuts. Boy, you had a ball in your day, didn't you?
Well, you know, we're talking a long time ago, even before your time, Tam. You know, we're talking 1860s here. You
Right,
know.
that was just before, yeah.
Which is when this pub was built, funnily enough.
1860s.
Yeah,
Was it?
this particular iteration. There's been a pub on this site probably since Shakespeare's time, or near this site since Shakespeare's time, and of course we'll come on to Shakespeare in a bit.
In his time, would this have been a pub or a coffee house?
And on this site, it would have been completely different. So we're just talking about the site here. There wouldn't necessarily, this building is just on the footprint of whatever was here at the time. But this particular building that we're in now dates from around about 1860. It's Grade 2 listed. But of course, prior to that, at some point, there would have been a number of buildings that predated it when it was back in the day as a cockpit. So it's likely, I mean, by the time this particular building was built, cockfighting had been outlawed. It was outlawed in, I believe, late 1830s. I can't remember exactly.
Those Victorian killjoys, you know.
Yes, exactly. The start of the kind of animal rights movement put paid
Not
to
a
that,
lot of
really.
joy in
Yeah.
it for the cock. Don't run with that.
I won't go there,
That was
Tam.
the previous conversation, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
No, but I mean, back in Shakespeare's time, it would have been rough and ready. You'd have bear baiting around here as well, wouldn't you?
I think a lot of that
was
was on the
very common.
South Bank, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The bear baiting, really. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Very good. Very visceral evocation.
Yeah,
bear
it's when they
baiting
tap
there.
the bile off is really...
Yeah.
yeah.
So, this is I was talking on my tours about the heyday of, if you like, not for the animals, as we say, but the heyday of blood sports, really. When you back in Shakespeare's time, you would have had dog fights, bear baiting, rats. Rat fighting was very, very popular up until the late 19th, 20th century. There is a great story about a guy in the 20th century who was prosecuted for having hundreds of rats underneath the floor of, on the cellar of the pub, basically.
I've known a few houses like that.
Yeah.
It's happening in Birmingham right now, isn't it? They're having rat fights up there.
Yeah, really.
Exactly. So it still goes on. And
It still goes
cockfighting
on,
does.
yes.
The number of people on my tours who, when I introduce the pub and talk about, these days are thankfully gone and the blood and the feathers have been cleared up and we now have a nice carpet down in the pub. The number of people who chime up and say, "Oh, I've been to a cockfight." So, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, around the
Well, in
world. It still goes,
Kidderminster and
still
places like
goes
that.
on, apparently. Yeah, just not here.
Henley-on-Thames.
Well, the badger baiting still goes on, doesn't it? I used to live in a house down in the country with the woods behind it, where there was badger baiting going on all the time until the police stopped it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was raised by a badger.
With
hi.
the wind in the willows.
No, he was raised by a badger. So
Raised by a
He lived
badger.
on the outskirts of Cambridge and he was raised... Well, he was raised by his parents, technically speaking, if we were to be very technical about it. But they had a badger that they adopted and he spent all his spare time with the badger. And they were best of pals. He could communicate with the badger. He had a kind of empathy with the badger, if that's
I think he should be the next guest on this podcast.
He's dead.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a bit of a
Well,
shame.
with this
You could get a
wonderful machine,
medium
we can
involved.
probably get hold of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, those Norwegians can do anything.
Yeah,
can't
well,
they?
exactly.
You could talk to him through a Ouija board or something like that.
So
A
just
Norwegian board.
Very good. I set that one up for you, Tom.
So just near here was the Blackfriars Theatre as well, wasn't it? So that was an indoor theatre, which was quite unusual for its time.
Very checkered history, and of course you know far more than I do about the theatre. But I mean, perhaps this is a good time to start talking about the Shakespeare connection.
Oh, yes.
And the theatrical connection, because what I love about, and we're getting on to sort of more psychogeographical elements here,
Sure.
but one of the special things about this site that we're on, and of course the name of the pub, the Shakespeare Connection, it's something that people on the tours really love. There's a plaque outside saying that Shakespeare purchased a house on or near this very site in 1613 for the princely sum of £140, and this would have been a part of the old Blackfriars gatehouse for the old friary that was here before the dissolution. So Shakespeare, we know, purchased a house here. We don't think he ever lived in it, so he probably bought to rent it. But it's one of the 6 authenticated Shakespeare signatures of the deeds to this particular house. And the reason we think he purchased this was because of the Blackfriars Theatre, which was nearby, as I said, and again used part of the old friary. But the kind of there's so many ways you can go with that because, of course, Shakespeare he described in Henry V, he described the theatre as a cockpit. So you've got this lovely little connection here with the cockpit and the theatre, and you've got, as I was saying to Geoff earlier, the first theatre on Drury Lane was called the Cockpit. So you've got this kind of lovely set of connections that go off in all kinds of directions, which I really love, and particularly when we talk about London history and pub history, and the origins of the theatre, of course, started out in the pub, basically, didn't they? So these travelling players that walked around and performed in galleried inns and courtyards. So obviously the pub was where everything happened. So that's always what I try to communicate in the tours is that if it happened in London, it happened in a pub at some point. So there's lots we could go to with that, I think, with those connections.
Well, of course, the first licensed group of players were Earl of Leicester's men, and the Earl of Leicester's house was just down the end of Fleet Street. So that was after licensing came in, because they were worried about the social risk of pubs and of people gathering when they ought not to gather.
Absolutely.
And getting up to no good, crime,
nothing
spreading
changes.
Disease. It's the usual.
And of course, these actors walking around causing trouble in London.
Goodness, as they still do.
There are actors everywhere.
Was the Blackfriars here before the Globe or after the Globe?
After the Globe.
After the Globe, right.
Yeah. So, of course, you had the theatre first in Shoreditch, and then they moved that when the lease ran out, and that was moved, wasn't it, over the river to where the Globe, near where the reconstructed Globe
where they didn't
currently
need a
is.
licence because it wasn't in the city.
Because it was exactly you're in South London, dirty South London. I can say that because I'm a bit of a bit. I lived south of the river myself. Yes. So the Globe obviously went south, and then the sort of history of the Blackfriars would take a podcast in itself to talk about, because it's such a checkered history of how difficult it was to actually get this theatre on this site set up and running. I mean, it started out originally as a theatre for boy actors, because they didn't want adult actors here. And there's all kinds of licensing problems over the years. And it was actually Shakespeare's involvement in that theatre was the second iteration. So there were ostensibly 2 Blackfriars theatres on this site. And Shakespeare's company became the leaseholders, and I think Shakespeare himself became a leaseholder.
So when was the Blackfriars pub built? That's late 19th
Round
century.
the corner from us now, just down towards the river, we've got the wonderful Blackfriar pub, which is second on my tour route. I'm giving it away now to people who want to book
We
onto
want
it.
to hear about your tour.
So yes, the Blackfriars just round the corner, and that was built not too long after this pub. So if we're saying that this is 1860, the Blackfriar, I think it's early 1870s, around 1870s, so 10 years later. And then, of course, it's one of London's most physically glorious pubs, isn't it? Inside and out.
kidding.
But, of course, that's the way it looks now is a product of the 1905 refurbishment in the arts and crafts kind of Art Nouveau inspired style that you see it in now. So that's the Blackfriar is later in its refurbishment, but again pays homage to the Blackfriars Friary.
So what
that's on
stood
the
on
site.
the Blackfriars site before the Blackfriars, the pub? What stood on the Blackfriars pub site before they built the pub there? Was that just part of the monastery, or was that
Well, I mean, the Friary would have been a huge footprint of this area where we're
so
on
it wasn't
now.
another pub, or
Well, the Friary, I should say, would have been. I mean, it stretched from Ludgate Hill down to the river, really, didn't it? So, but in terms of that pub that we're talking about, again, we can get onto this whole idea about authenticity and when is a pub, what is the original pub? We know that there was, the Blackfriar when that was built, 1870. That was the pub that was built then, presumably from scratch.
Yeah.
Whether some houses were levelled for it, I don't know. But the way that you see it now was a complete refurb, so it would have looked very different in 1870.
Well, on the other side of the road, because of course the road replaced the Fleet River, was Bridewell Palace, and there was actually a bridge that linked Bridewell, and it crossed the Fleet. It had its own private bridge, like the Bridge of Sighs. And Bridewell Palace, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, and others actually lodged there. So some very, very well-known people, because the French embassy was just near where we are as well. There was a great tragedy there that happened called the Fatal Vespers, where they were all gathered for Mass, and the floor collapsed and about 100 people at least were crushed to death. And Protestant commentators were quick to jump on this and said it was God's providence that they were all gathered undertaking this unholy mass in London, the home of Protestantism. How dare they? God has acted.
You don't mean to say that people were criticizing each other for politicizing disaster, even in that day?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
Disaster
wow.
was a commodity
Yes.
in those days.
Of course, yeah.
And there were a lot of disasters. They didn't have health and safety in the same way that we do today.
No health and safety executives.
Yeah, nothing like that.
Yeah. I didn't know about the fatal Vespers,
Yeah.
because we were just talking about people being crushed to death in the old Blackfriars Friary, not too far away from where we are. So I've just shown Geoff before we started recording, the only publicly visible foundations of the friary are just yards away opposite the pub. It's St Anne's former churchyard. You can still see this pile of, I always say to the people on my tours, this is the oldest thing you're going to see on the tour, even older than the cockpits in the carpets in the cockpits. So this is the foundations of the Blackfriars Friary, so we can actually see them not too far away.
That little alleyway just up there.
So if you turn left out here, there's a church, basically an old churchyard with the old gravestones, and you'll see there's a pile of very old-looking stones, which presumably are the foundations. Could date as far back as 1278. So, but of course, there was a story about the friary giving out alms at the time where there was a lot of hunger around, and they were giving out bread, and there was such a crush to the gates for people who were starving that hundreds of people were crushed to death. So we live in that's the thing about London, isn't it? Is that it's built on violence, bloodshed,
Well,
crime.
the first Great Fire of London, which was in
12-something?
It was 12-something, and it was London Bridge at the time, and it started on the south bank of the river, and hundreds and hundreds of spectators came onto the bridge to look at it, and then flames leapt across the other side of them on the bridge, and the bridge burnt down with them immolated on the bridge. So, just saying,
So that became the great folk memory for 300 years before a bigger, better fire
There
came along.
were two fires that were, in terms of their size and reach and extent, as extensive as the Great Fire of London in medieval times.
Because it was all wood, of course, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there were attempts made. There were building codes as far back as the 13th and 14th centuries to try and limit, install gaps between buildings and fire breaks and pentices, which are the overhanging bit that you get, which is very medieval. The overhanging story to limit the size of those and the number of them, because otherwise it was a fire trap.
Is it jettying? That's called,
That's another way of describing
building
it.
out.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't expand. London's the same now, isn't it? You can't build outwards, you've got to build upwards.
Yeah.
And of course, in those days, they would build up and out so that you would get these very higgledy-piggledy buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this whole area would have been full of all that. I mean, it's really, really quite historic, isn't it? And we're on the city side of the Fleet River as well, just near St Paul's. So this was occupied, when was St Paul's built? 605? 607?
I
Something
think it
like
was
that.
60. I'm going to say 604, but I think I would
604,
go with
you could
you
be.
more than me.
Well,
Bishop
the
Ma-
original,
Bishop-
604, I think, wasn't it? That's the...
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Bishop
Was that one or
Bishop,
two St. Paul's before this St. Paul's?
Bishop
But
Miletus.
this is the
This is
fifth,
the
isn't it?
fifth, I think.
this
This is the fifth on
Yeah.
the site, yeah.
So the original, what we believe possibly is the original church of Roman London was actually where the Tower of London is, or just near where the Tower of London is. And it moved to this site, or it moved obviously after Roman times to... Why did it move here? Possibly because it had an uninterrupted route to the west. Perhaps because the
It was a high
area was
point,
already...
wasn't it?
It was a high point. It was one of three main hills in the city. And of course it would have been a wooden church originally.
So guess what happened? It burned down.
I know, there was a lot of burning in those days.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Fire and fury.
Yeah.
That's what always amazed me. The Tower of London is not actually in the city. That surprises people, that it was built outside to cow the city.
Yeah.
In the Conqueror.
Yeah.
But what's the oldest pub in the city of London, do you think?
Oh wow, this is a great question, because of course I get asked this all the time.
All the time.
There there's no real way of knowing, in the same way that there isn't really an accurate way of answering that question in the country as a whole. So, of course, and I love debating these ideas of authenticity and everything else, and how you age a data pub. There are sort of pubs in London where it says we're the oldest pub in London, and you always take that with a pinch of salt. But we do know that there are a number of pubs which predate or parts of it have survived, predate the Great Fire, or just post-date it. So in terms of the city, nearest to us, it's a pretty safe bet that the old Cheshire Cheese on Fleet Street, just off Fleet Street, has a good claim to be one of the oldest authentic surviving pubs, because, of course, we know it predated the Great Fire of London, and it proudly proclaims on its sign that it was rebuilt in 1667. So, of course, what's the word I'm looking for here? The motivation, I suppose, as soon as the Great Fire was built, the churches would take a few decades. You know, St Paul's took 36, 40 years to rebuild. The pubs, within a few months, they were rebuilding the pubs. So you can see where the priorities were.
Well, they needed the pubs for the workers
exactly,
who were rebuilding the churches, didn't they?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, of course, Christopher Wren, we know there's at least 2 pubs associated with housing his workers, the Old Bell, just off the other side of Fleet Street, being an example of that as well. But so the Cheshire Cheese, the old Cheshire Cheese, was rebuilt 1667. And a lot of what you see when you go in, it is a fantastic pub. I mean, it really is just one of the most extraordinary pubs I think you could go into. It feels like stepping back in time. But most of what you see is possibly the fixtures and fittings 19th century, but that little snug bar when you go in to your right, when you first go in, the one where the famous Polly the Parrot is still holding court.
What's the story about Polly the Parrot?
Well, we can come on to Polly the Parrot, but yes, so...
Not that we want to decamp from here to go up there to tell the story.
No, it wouldn't. I don't think Samuel Smith would like us taking our technical equipment into one of his pubs. Humphrey Smith, I should say.
No, we've got a story about that. Sam Smith, are you listening? But anyway, we'll leave that for another day.
That's the late night version of this. So, yes, that's a little snug bar. There are certain aspects or kind of timber that were used to construct that, which some people think predate the Great Fire. So they actually think that there's some timbers in that room which were salvaged from the original pub. So this is always why it's impossible to answer this question, because pubs have been rebuilt so often. So even if there's been, like with the Cockpit, they may well have been a pub on this site for hundreds and hundreds of years, but this particular iteration of the pub, you know, we know exactly when that dates from. It's 19th century. Most pubs in the country are 19th century, basically, because that's when the big boom in pub building
But infested
happened.
with evil entities as well.
Of course, we've always got to have an entity. Not here, apparently. There was the Londoners did an investigation into whether this pub was haunted. And went down into the cellars and everything. And the knowledgeable person who conducted the investigation concluded that it was not, which is a bit disappointing, isn't it, really? You think every pub needs a ghost.
Yeah, or more than one. Or in a portal to hell. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that investigation was done by the Londonist.
It's a guest writer, so somebody who specialises in psychic investigations, I think.
Oh, right.
Conducted a tour a few years ago. A good few years.
I'll have to ask one of our previous guests on Timetable what he thinks of that and why he didn't rustle up a ghost. I mean, clearly, there must be ghosts that can be rustled up. They just didn't find them, right?
I would have thought so, in a place like this.
Yeah.
I did read somewhere, and I can't find the source now, but I did read somewhere that a member of staff claimed in the Cockpit that there is a ghost that very helpfully clears people's glasses from the tables at the end of the night.
Very helpful, isn't
which
it? Yeah.
Usually, of course, they're smashing the glasses around, but this is obviously a very well-trained ghost.
So the opposite of a poltergeist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's a very restful...
helpergeist, you could say,
Helpergeist,
something like that. Yeah.
Hi, this is Tam MacDonald, your host. If you're enjoying Timetable London, then please tell your friends about us by sending them a link to the show, giving us a mention on social media, or even by, or especially by, chatting about us in the pub. Timetable London, for everything you love about the world's greatest city.
But you were mentioning Polly the Parrot.
Yes, Polly the Parrot, obviously, so we're going from cockfighting to parrots.
Yeah.
So if you go into the old Cheshire Cheese, as I say, and you look into above the bar on the little snug on the right as you go in, you'll see there's a stuffed African grey parrot. and that is probably the most famous resident of that pub. Everybody who was anyone has drunk in the Cheshire Cheese. You've got Charles Dickens, Walt Disney, Mark Twain, etc., etc. But Polly is probably still the most well-known inhabitant because she was there they live quite a long time, don't they? So she was probably there for, he or she, I think the sex was indeterminate actually, 40 odd years, and became so well-known people would travel over just to see Polly, and especially to hear the foul, no pun intended, foul language that would be issued, because of course being a parrot would imitate the language used by the guests of the pub, something that of course the Samuel Smith policy with its no swearing rule would also hate nowadays. But
also nowadays they'd get shut down, wouldn't they?
They would indeed, whether it was a parrot or a customer.
Because you can't offend the bar staff.
Exactly. So Polly was well known, and they thought that he or she had died after the armistice, the First World War. There were so many champagne corks popping in celebration, and he or she was imitating the sound of the corks, keeled over, and people thought, well, that's the end of Polly. Not so, just a minor, heart murmur, and revived and lived on until 1928. And when Polly died, because of course we're talking about the Cheshire Cheese just being off Fleet Street, every single newspaper around the world, you could say, broadcast this news. And there's a great selection of cuttings on the wall of the old Cheshire Cheese saying, Polly, great bird, dies, stuff like that. So that's where we're going to see as well. But there's also, there's so many, I'm fascinated by animals in pubs, the history of animals in pubs as well. And there's another great story of when a travelling circus came to town, and I know you've got great stories about the Strand as well and the animals on there. There was a baby elephant that was brought into the old Cheshire Cheese. And again, was reported widely in the newspapers.
How did they get it in through that tiny little door?
I don't know. Well, I think it's just a small elephant, I guess, maybe, yeah. It does beg the question, doesn't it? And
somebody would have been behind pushing the elephant.
But it must have been quite a squeeze. But
pulling it if they could find anything to pull by.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, if the trunk has survived.
There are stories of it being fed brandy and given a pipe to smoke in its trunk and everything. I mean, like I say, different times. But yeah.
Different mores. My Polly story relates to the guest books in the Cheshire Cheese. We did a little study of these signature books, big red files and so on. And we found that there had been an awful lot of paper damage, which was attributed to the Polly pecking at the paper. And when I asked the then general manager of the place, he said, the only thing that's destroyed more of the paper in these books than the Parrot was subsequent general managers who've ripped out this page or that page for the signatures on them.
To sell them or to...
So we went through a number of these books and couldn't find very many famous signatures.
That's a shame.
Although we did find, I think I've told you the story, Geoff, about the I don't know what the naval term would be, but the top officers for HMS Sheffield, before they went down as part of the Falklands action, had their last dinner in London at the Cheshire Cheese. They all signed the book. General managers that came there subsequently probably didn't see what the significance of these guys was, so they've let that page stand in there. At least it was there as of 3 years ago. And of course, infamously, they went out to the South Atlantic and their ship sunk.
Yeah.
Or not sunk.
It's incredible.
It was sunk.
Yeah. And there's been quite a few people who've raised this because it brings us onto archives, really, doesn't it? And, I know that the cheese does have surviving paperwork kept. You would know. I wouldn't, because I've never had the grand tour of where all they keep the paperwork in the top rooms or the top office. And there's been people saying, should these books and these paperwork not be
You almost need an archivist,
transferred?
really, don't
It's
you?
almost like you need someone who's both an archivist and a pub
Where
tour
would you
guide.
find one of those, though?
Well, they're so hard to come by, aren't they? Dying breeds. But but it does raise the question of, the history of pubs is quite fragile and ephemeral, because not just because of the sort of fragile nature of the pub industry and it becoming ever more so, the survival of pubs, but the survival of documentation about pubs, because they are transient places where people come and go. So it's hard to get a record of who has drunk in pubs. I was just reading yesterday about this whole question of where did Shakespeare drink and all of the rest of it. There was a great, there's a story that's recently unearthed about the tabard, which of course famous through Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which was pulled down in the Victorian times. And I think it had been destroyed by fire anyway previous to that, so it was a rebuild. But there was a story of somebody who was not too far after Shakespeare who said that there was a window where Shakespeare and his friends etched their names. It's almost too good to be true, isn't it? So I'm not sure if it is true or not. But a lot of this history of who drunk in pubs is lost. And so something like what the cheese has should be...
Is there a
deserved,
directory
really.
of former pub names? Because one of my...
Yes.
bugbears over the last 20 or 30 years is the way in which many historic pubs have changed their names because they've been taken over by large conglomerates, and they are now the Thirsty Ferret or whatever it was. Whereas they'd been for 600 years, they'd been the Ferret and the beach ball or whatever it is.
Really?
I think I've been to that one.
So is there a database? Is there a database that sets it all out? This pub became this in this date, and then it became this in this date.
They're not for everything, but there are people who've done an extraordinary amount of work, particularly London. We're very lucky in London. There's been a huge amount of work, and I was looking at, I can't remember what it is now, but there is somebody who has done more or less what you're saying, because you can go through the old trade directories, obviously only back to a certain point though, and then you've got to look at things like, if you're talking about when a medieval place was, you're looking at eyewitness accounts of things like that, but it is
Do you think
tricky.
the pub name should be listed? Because in the past I've thought there are pros and cons.
Yeah.
Pros are, yes, actually the name of an historic pub has a kind of historical value, a cultural value. You wouldn't change Blenheim Palace to something else, to, I don't know, the Sports Direct Palace, would you? And so... But on the other hand, pubs have changed their names down the years, naturally.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important point, because you do find that when pubs want to reinvent themselves, that they want a new name, but often that's erasing the history that went before, and that kind of raises some kind of strong opinions. On the other hand, it can go back the other way. So a lovely example of that is in just on Borough High Street. There's a pub that's just recently reopened, the Blue Maid, which I highly recommend to any listeners. It's a fantastic addition to Borough High Street. But prior to that, it was derelict for many years. They had a lot of problems. It had problems before it was closed down, and it was called the Blue-Eyed Maid. So I used to work very close to there and walk past it every day. And there's nothing more sad than seeing a boarded up pub for years and years that should be open and thriving in a really busy area. And when they reopened as they're called the Blue Maid with a picture of a mermaid, I thought to myself, oh, what a shame that they've changed the name. Actually, the truth of the matter is the Blue Maid was the pub's original name.
Yeah.
So they've now reverted back to what it was. So it can go the other way as well.
And of course, Wetherspoons, and I hate to kind of use that term in your company necessarily.
That's okay. Well, I think
do
there's
go
a place
out of
for
their
Wetherspoons.
way to name their pubs after local historical connections, don't they? Which
They
at least
do.
is something.
They do.
Yeah.
I mean, they make an effort, and they've got a lot of the pubs, particularly the Wetherspoon in the cities, have all sorts of plaques about what went on there and the history of the building and everything. So I think they're not bad.
I'm just going to pause there and say, what would you like?
I'll have another pint
You'll
of the
have
same,
another
please.
one, Tam?
Another half would be great.
Chris?
A half of that one, the tribute, please.
Brilliant.
Thank
I
you.
will join
That's
you
very
in a
kind.
moment. Carry on talking.
What did you think of the 5 points, by the way? Yeah. Good.
They were fantastic. But did you say Walt Disney went to the old Cheshire Cheese?
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's a Disney street, isn't there, somewhere in the... Yeah, absolutely. Which there was a photograph of him. He came over to find out about his family, although he was adopted. But there is a Disney street for some reason in the south of London, which he had a picture taken of.
So maybe it was on one of these trips
It was one of
that
the
he
trips.
called
No,
in.
He came sort of incognito.
Yeah.
Sort of do that. But how do they know he went to the old Cheshire Cheese then? Was that?
Oh, I think it was reported.
Reported,
yeah,
yeah,
it was reported,
yeah.
and I'm sure
Well,
there
it was
would have been a
probably the same
signature
occasion,
somewhere
yeah.
that's now disappeared, possibly. But yeah, it was such a famous pub. I mean, it's still called one of the most, the most famous pub in London.
Yeah.
One of the most famous
Yeah.
ever. And it has been that's not just a recent tourism thing. It's been that way for a long time, because of course you have the potentially spurious Dr. Johnson connection, because obviously Johnson lived just round the corner in Gough Square when he was creating the dictionary.
Did he ever go there?
We don't have any proof that he did. However, it's almost inconceivable that he didn't, because we know that he drank in more or less every other pub in London.
Right.
And it's literally, thank you very much for that, Geoff, thank you.
Thank you.
He drank like I say, he famously used.
He would have had to boycott the Cheshire Cheese.
He would have had a reason not to go,
specifically boycott
because
it.
it's within yards, 600 yards of his house.
Fascinating question here about, you raised the expression authenticity of memory. Fascinating question as to how historians and librarians and archivists settle onto something and say, this is a fact and we know this to be true, or it's not a fact and we know it not to be true. When there might be gradations of truth, not alternative facts, but facts that are copper-bottom true, it's nailed on as this. But these weasel words about, we know that it was at or near this place, or evidence suggests that Dr. Johnson, whatever. I paced that out at one time. The distance from his house to the door of the Cheshire Cheese is 129 steps. Samuel Johnson was not one of the greatest athletes known to our species. So I can't imagine that, given that he got to the Mitre and the Devil and the this and the that, he couldn't possibly not have gone there.
Exactly.
Well, exactly. And he went to dinner at Goldsmith's house, which was just in that little passage there. Yeah. So
of course.
He can't have not known of the alley.
Yeah.
Can you imagine with his curiosity about words that he would say, I keep passing this place that looks like it's interesting, and I'm a known drinker, but maybe another time I'll go. I've got to go and find a pint down at the Mitre.
Yeah, exactly. It's inconceivable that he didn't.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah. And of course the pub has used that to its advantage. Apparently it's the Dr. Johnson's chair, and they've got a copy of the dictionary in there as well, under special, in a special place that only some people get to see. But it's an interesting one about, I think we obviously rely a lot on documentary evidence, don't we, when people feel nervous about saying this probably happened if there's no documentary evidence. But as we know, documentary evidence is not infallible either. So
they've got a Dr. Johnson chair in the Anchor on Bankside, haven't they, I think, or a Dr. Johnson room.
Oh, I don't know. To be honest with you, I've never actually been in the Anchor yet. I do have a spreadsheet of London pubs, and I'm trying to visit all of them, but I haven't been to the Anchor yet. Funnily enough.
It's quite an interesting one. Yeah.
I have to make sure I prioritise that one.
Long life, Claire.
Yes. How did you get into doing pub tours? I mean, how did it start? Lovely idea. I'm thinking of doing tours, but
yes, you should. I definitely come on one of your tours.
But a pub tour sounds perfect.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not, I have to say, it's not my company. It's run by the very lovely John Warland, who has written 2 books, one called Liquid History, which is about sort of his favourite historic pubs, but also there's his most recent is called Local Legends, which is relevant to what we're talking about, because those of you who are here with me, rather than looking at the podcast, rather than listening, is that if you look over the bar, you'll see there's a book on display, Local Legends, and gracing the front cover is the Cockpit itself. It's actually made the front cover. Have you lost your magnet, Geoff?
I've lost my magnet.
Looks like you have.
But not your magnetism.
Yeah,
very
that's
good.
true. But
It must be here somewhere. It's got to be here somewhere.
Here, let me scrabble around on the floor.
Between here and
Carry
the bar.
on talking while I scrabble on the floor.
Slightly off-putting.
That is the one's disadvantage. Oh, here we are.
Have you found it?
How it got all the way over there?
I don't know how it got all the way over there.
In your enthusiasm to leap up to the bar.
How did magnets get everywhere?
There we go.
I'm back in action, you'll be pleased to hear.
Yes, so to get back, I heard about Liquid History tours when somebody kindly bought me the first book, Liquid History, and this was during lockdown. So, I mean, one of the main reasons, I backtrack a little bit, I moved to London in 2019, having visited many, many times, and thought one of the things I wanted to do when I moved down here, one of the reasons I wanted to move down here was to try and visit every pub in London. I'm still working on it. It's very hard. Hard work, someone's got to do it. And so obviously somebody thought I might like this book. During lockdown, of course, we were all missing pubs and drinking and everything like that, and socially. And I read it and then found out about not only was there a book, but there were tours. And thought, when this is all over, maybe I'll look into putting my CV in and see what happened. And it's been 2 years doing the tours. We're a lovely group of guides. We all get on really well. It's a fantastic camaraderie, and we all basically have great fun. So people who come on our tours is like, is this the best job in the world? To which I'm like, with no offence to the archive profession, I do usually say, yes, it is.
So do you have a specific area that you concentrate on?
Yes, it's the city. So, I mean, the company runs we do private tours, we do tours of specific areas in London. So, for instance, we just talked about Borough, so we do tours of Borough, Bermondsey, etc. But the route that I do, because I'm doing it it's one of a few jobs I have, so it's my kind of fun side job, if you like. So I focus on the City of London, and the standard route is starting at St Paul's, finishing at Temple's. So there's a number of different pubs you can call in at on the way. I always start at the Cockpit here, obviously. It's one of my personal favourites. And then we just wend our way down Fleet Street. Sometimes we might be in the Old Bell. Sometimes we might be in the Old Cheshire Cheese. I often take people to the old Bank of England, which, of course, is a converted bank, not a pub, but has on the site of the Haunch of Venison, I believe, which was frequented by, guess what, Dr. Johnson. And then we usually finish up at the George, which is a fantastic pub just over on Geoff's part of the world on the Strand, which, of course, started life as a coffee house. So, yeah, there's lots to talk about, and it's often... Yeah, some of the let's just say some of the tours, if they're going really well, we don't just stick to the four. We've been known to sort of carry on into the night to sort of Cockney sing around somewhere in the West. So
any old iron. Any old iron.
Yes.
Now you've got to do
any old iron.
I was singing that in Borough the other week, funnily enough.
Do you think that tourists actually come to London for the pubs? Is that your experience? Do they? I mean, obviously they're biased in a way because they come on one of your tours, which is a pub crawl tour sort of thing.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, is it one of the things they associate with Britain?
Yes, I think a lot of our clients are American, and a lot of what they love, again, it's a captive audience because they're already on the tour, but they want to experience London through its pubs because they often say, we just don't have anything like this. They've got, as we know, it's a truism, so they've got bars and they've got mock English pubs, but they don't have this kind of thing. And a lot of the time at the end of every tour, I always say, what's been your favourite pub today? And they're all very different. So many of them say here, the Cockpit, because they're like, this is, when I imagine an English pub, this is what I think about. And a lot of, a surprising number of Americans, well, I'm using Americans as the example because that is most of the people that I deal with, they come over because they are cask ale fans. So, that's another good thing about, because they are cask ale or real ale fans.
Right, yeah.
And again, you can't, I used to say you can't get that in America. It's actually being imported, it's being replicated, if you like. There are some people doing cask ale dispense, but it's a very rare kind of thing, and it's hard to replicate somewhere else. So they're actually coming over here to try our beer, our style of beer, because it is something that I'm
warm beer, don't they?
Warm. I always say to them, it's the old joke about English beer being warm and flat. It's like neither of those things true, and if it's true, then that means the pub is not very good at keeping its beer. And one of the great things about starting at the Cockpit is they keep their beer very, very well. Everything they do, the cellars are fantastic. They do a good selection of beer as well. So this pub is the first time a lot of Americans, for instance, will have tasted cask ale, and they're very nice people because they all follow my recommendation, and I've never had anyone not like it. Yeah. So I always explain to them that it's cellar temperature. It's not. They always say, "Is it room temperature?" No, it should not be room temperature. It will be cellar temperature. It will be cool, but it will have natural life in it because, of course, it's still a living product in the point that it's in the cask. It shouldn't be flat and warm. However, of course, if England was a hotter place, would you want to sit on a beach? It's going to go warm pretty quickly, isn't it? So there's a reason why this beer suits our climate, basically.
There's a deep, long rabbit hole to be discovered and explored on the subject of American v. British beer. But I must recall one of my favorite limericks from university, and I'll leave it to the discretion of our executive producer to cut it out on the table.
Oh dear.
But there once was a girl called Anne Heuser who swore that no man could surprise her. But Pabst took a chance, found a Schlitz in her pants, and now she is sadder but wiser.
We're going to keep that in.
I think that's what she said.
As the bishop said to the actress.
See, second point in. This is where it gets interesting.
But on that basis, and for now, that's as good a point as any before we get into more dolphin jokes and filthy American limericks, to say thank you very much, Claire, for joining us in this pub.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you think we've done justice to this pub with the conversation we've done here?
I think we've done our best, but with a pub like this, you really need, a good 10 hours of solid drinking.
Yeah.
Maybe...
But I hope you'll come back again and do another one sometime.
I would love to. Thank you. It's been great fun.
Lots more we can learn from you.
You're quite
And
right.
ditto.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you for executive producing. Geoff, it's been a pleasure as ever. But again, and most of all, Claire, thanks for joining us
Thank you so
on
much.
Timetable.
Thank you.
Well, as Tam and Geoff dissolve into laughter and slide under the table, I guess it's left to me, your careworn producer, to tell you about our next show, when we will be coming from the Golden Lion in Romford. Yes, Romford. And our guest will be top London cabbie David Styles. No one knows more about London than a cabbie. Don't miss it.
Join us next time.